Good evening, everyone. I call to order the April 8th, 2026 meeting of the Milton School Committee. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First thing is the approval of the April 8th agenda. Are there any changes?
I don't have any changes, but before we dive in and let you lead this meeting, Amanda, we just wanted to acknowledge that this is your final meeting as a member of the school committee and of course as our chair. And so we wanted to acknowledge that by just thanking you for everything that you've done for us over these past couple of years, but especially this year. Your leadership has been so steady through a difficult budget season, but you've also just kept us all together. And we did, as your fellow school committee members, just want to acknowledge that we got you a little gift, which we'll give to you. It's your opportunity to just go and enjoy Steel and Rye with your friends and family, which you have really earned. And yeah, there's not much to say that captures it, but I want to see what other people might want to add in, just words of gratitude.
No, I can, sorry, jump in. We will miss you very much next year, and so sad that our time working with you will come to an end. I hope our interactions continue outside of this meeting room, and wish you all the best, but it's been great. You've been a fantastic chair, and just a great colleague to work with in all things. And we're going to miss you a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work on behalf of No Kids.
Thanks. Appreciate it. You want to go first?
Sure, I'll go next. Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. It's been great. This is my first year and I've learned so much from you. It's been a real pleasure to work with you on a bunch of issues, and you make, I'm sure being the chair of the school committee is not easy, but you make it look easy. And I just really appreciate your service to the town and to the students of Milton. And we're going to miss you. I wish you all the best.
I echo everything they said. I hate to say goodbye, so stay in touch. Thank you so much for making our meetings productive and short within the reasonable time frame. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's great knowing you and working with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. It's been great. I've loved working with all of you and learned a lot, and just have even greater appreciation for everything that the school administration and the school committee does, and all the teachers, and the passion from the parents has been great. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Sorry to put you on
No,
the spot.
it's okay. I appreciate
You may
it.
now proceed with
Thank you.
your, thank you very much.
Thank you. No, thank you. That was very sweet. We will move to public comment. In accordance with school committee policy, we welcome members of the community to share their perspectives with us during public comment. We have set aside up to 15 minutes for this part of the meeting. And individuals may speak for up to 3 minutes each. While the school committee does not respond directly to public comment, there may be opportunities for members to address issues that are raised over the course of the meeting when relevant topics are on our agenda. We strive to engage in respectful discourse during our meeting and ask that public comment speakers keep that in mind. And speakers should just introduce themselves for the record. So is there anybody in the audience or in the meeting who is looking to speak for public comment? Is there anyone online? If so, if you could raise your hand.
No hands are raised.
All right. We'll move to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chairperson Serio. On behalf of Katie and Colin and I, we also want to thank you for your steady leadership this year. It has been great to work with someone who really comes to the work with great ability to think and ask good questions and have good ideas and be a thought partner and support the work and always be even in the way that you conduct everything that you do and all your conversations. And so it's much appreciated. So thank you. I would like to welcome Taylor Scully. Taylor is a ninth grader at Milton High School. She's a student representative here tonight. Welcome, Taylor. A little bit about Taylor. She is a freshman. She's currently a softball player, but more importantly, she is a member of the state champion girls hockey team. So welcome, Taylor. Give us a big heads up about what's going on at Milton High.
So first we have like spring sports are underway, so baseball, softball, rugby, lacrosse, track and field, unified track and field. All of it's like starting up and getting into full swing this week. Term 3 just ended. Monday was the last and final day of the term. I believe the teachers have up till Friday to put grades in. And so we're now fully in term 4. We have school day SAT on April 15th, financial literacy fair April 17th, and then we have April vacation in 2 weeks.
There you go. Week and a half, no one's counting.
Yeah. That's about it for right now.
Any questions for Taylor?
What was it like being at the garden for
It was really fun.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was so cool. The environment's awesome.
Tell us about the parade. Did you have a parade last Saturday?
I wish I could have been there. I was sick, so I had to
Oh,
miss it, but I heard it was really fun.
So the town of Milton came out. There were people at the Boston Garden who were parents, staff, students, and then community members. As someone who has children that graduated, I saw so many people there that were just residents of the town, so happy to be part of the hockey program and watch you guys win the championship. So it was a great morning, great day. So congratulations, you guys did a great job. A lot of underclassmen on that team.
Yeah.
And you'll be back again next year. So state finals last year, state championship this year, no pressure. Keep moving it through. But we appreciate you coming as a freshman and representing the school, and we look forward to seeing you again this year and next year. And have a great spring semester.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Other updates that we have very quickly, the girls' hockey parade was last Saturday. We want to thank our athletic director and also all the other town departments that help support that parade across the town on Saturday. I was able to attend the unified track meet today. We had over 15 student athletes and 50 student peer athletes. So we had 65 students take part today. Coach Claire Ritten and Coach Andrew Hunt were well organized and had everything moving. We played Braintree. It couldn't be a better day to be on the track. Javelin, long jump, shot put, and 100-yard dash. Amazing to watch our student athletes in unified track take part. It's just a great day. If you have not been to a unified track event, there are still, I believe, 3 or 4 more. I suggest you go. It's the best place to be. Great day. I think we put out in some of our literature, but the Milton High School Theater METG state champions, they won the state championship in theater 2 weeks ago. It's amazing that this theater group for the second year in a row as well has been in the finals at the Boston Prudential Center. They did a production of The Sparrow alongside the Joseph Case High School and Boston Latin School, and they won that 2 weekends ago. So congratulations to them. And if you want to go to the next event, it's the Drowsy Chaperone from April 30th to May 3, and it will be at Milton High. So please go onto the website if you want to get tickets. Our 8th graders met the Milton High School National Honor Society. So our Milton High National Honor Society students went down to the 8th grade to talk to them about the high school and the coursework and the program of studies. We're really thankful for both Principal Karen Cahill of the high school and Principal Bill Fish at the middle school. They're doing a lot of connecting of our 8th grade to 9th grade and middle school to high school work this year and leading into next year. And we're very thankful for that. It's going to be great for the students to find out what the high school looks like. There's a lot of good things coming forward for them as they enter 9th grade next year. Our elementary future problem solvers went to Clark University. 15 represented Milton Public Schools at the Massachusetts State Future Problem Solving Competition held on Saturday the 28th at Clark University in Worcester. The 2026 challenge was surveillance, and the future problem teacher Debbie Green Muse shared with the students did a tremendous job. So congratulations to our elementary future problem solvers. Elementary school celebrated the Francophone. March is the month of La Francophone, when the diversity of our French language and French-speaking world is celebrated worldwide. So we congratulate our elementary. And we also should say that last week, our students who took the DELF, we had 100% passing grade for the DELF, which is a incredible feat for our students in the language of French that gives them certification in France as quote a native speaker. It's a really big deal and a big thing to celebrate, as world language is a big part of our school district. Jazz night at the high school is Tuesday, April 9. That's tomorrow night. The spring cabaret is at the high school auditorium on April 13. Music discovery night is April 16 from 7 to 7:30 at Milton High. The Tri-M will be hosting the second annual music discovery night on the 16th at 7 p.m. It was a huge success last year, and we hope that everybody can get out who's interested in music in the Milton Public Schools. As our freshman student rep Taylor said, that we have April break coming up, not next week, but it's April 20 to 24. And our annual election will be held on Tuesday, April 28th. The school committee will have a reorganizational meeting on Wednesday, the 29th. We will do the reorg, but we do also have a couple of items on the agenda to get through as well. I think so we can talk about that. So that is the superintendent's update.
Next up, we have the review of the district data process.
So we would like to have come to the table Brian Selig, who is our K-12 Director of Mathematics, Kat Young, who is our K-8 English Language Arts Director, and H. Hardy, who is our 9 through 12 Department Head of English Language Arts at Milton High. We're very thankful to have them come tonight to share what some of the data sources are that we use in Milton Public Schools to inform our instruction and our curriculum work and our assessment work and our work with children, as well as the process for how we use that data. So we're thankful to have you here, and really important, I think, for when we talk about our 5 priorities. One of them is using data to inform some of our instruction and what students need. So we're very excited to have you here tonight to display that to the school committee and the school community. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for having us. We can go to the next slide to start off. What we're going to be doing tonight is focusing on district priority number 2, which is the increased use of data to inform instruction. And we're focusing tonight on ELA and math. And just to roadmap how we're going to do this, we're going to be talking at elementary, middle, and then high school levels. We're going to show the sources of data that we use, how we use it, and then when we're done going through those 3, we'll talk about the challenges that we face and what our next steps are. And we have in the back of this deck an appendix of examples of some of the data that we'll be talking about as we go through it.
So this next slide may look familiar if you remember we've come before to talk about data. This is something we do to level set our understanding of what certain data sources are and what they're defined as. So in general, we think of summative assessments as our assessment of student learning, whereas formative would be the assessment for future learning. And so some of those examples of formative assessment are screening data, diagnostic data, progress monitoring for intervention, and then informal assessments that teachers and interventionists use on an everyday basis.
This next slide sort of gives a little bit of the structure of the next several pieces of the presentation. So as H said, we have sort of broken this up by level, but there are a lot of ways in which there's consistent use of data regardless of the level that we're talking about. So just on this slide, which is focused on elementary, there are things that are specific and only used at elementary, like iReady as a diagnostic tool for math in K-5, as well as the DIBELS literacy screener is used only in our elementary schools. And then some of the other items here listed, including the educator-informed informal assessments that are most commonly built into our high-quality standard-aligned curriculum in the form of an exit ticket. In the case of the elementary math curriculum, there's a component called Check Your Understanding, which serves the same purpose. This is a tool that is used in our elementary classrooms for purposes of sort of just quickly getting a pulse on how students are processing the instruction that they've received. This can also be done through hand signals or, sort of thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs middle. And this is a practice common to our teachers regardless of subject area and regardless of level. So you'll see some repetition there. Similarly with our summative end unit, or in the case of elementary math, end module assessments, these are built into the curriculum, and these are used to sort of measure each student's proficiency with the grade level content that was taught within that unit or module. And then MCAS spans obviously elementary, middle, and high school, so it has similar use and purpose for us regardless of the level that we're speaking on. So in a little bit more specificity with regard to elementary, how the data is currently being used. As I mentioned, we have sort of built-in what we call curriculum embedded common assessments that are used across the district at grade level and measure proficiency based on the sort of most recent instructional material that was covered. In the case of MCAS at the elementary level, myself and Kat, meet most often with grade level teams of teachers within elementary schools early in the school year to unpack the most recent MCAS data when it's released. We typically tend to do that from an item analysis perspective. That gives us some insight into where the areas that we performed well as a team in a grade level relative to the state. What are some areas that maybe we did not perform as well relative to the state, and could there be some explanations for that? Might that have been content that was relegated to after MCAS based on our scope and sequence? And I'll show you a kind of more concrete example of that when we get to sixth grade, actually, because that's common across middle and high school as well. And then in the case of the iReady diagnostic, which as Kat alluded to, we've been appearing in previous years sort of to unpack some of that data in great detail. We use the diagnostic in the beginning of the year to see where students' proficiency level is new in the school year relative to both overall and within the four domain areas that iReady measures proficiency in. We administer it again in the middle of the year to look for growth, and where there isn't, we try to figure out maybe what might be going on there on a student-by-student basis. And then the end of the year is a sort of great way to capture all of the learning that's happened over the course of the year, and we tend to see pretty impressive and significant growth from beginning to end of the year with the iReady diagnostic tool. Each time the students take the diagnostic, as you might recall, it unlocks sort of a personalized pathway worth of lessons that are built into some of the instructional routines in our elementary classrooms and in the upper elementary grades, often used as a sort of built into outside of school day routine, 1 or 2 lessons per week done for homework.
And different from iReady, but similar in its interval, DIBELS is administered 3 times a year in K-5 with up to 5 subtests that are very short in nature, depending the number of subtests depending on the grade level and what that assesses from a developmental standpoint. And that data is used as a foundational measure to triangulate information to know how many further assessments we might need to determine what type of intervention might be needed, if any at all. And I'll go into a little more detail here with this example. So I'll kind of walk you through what our process is for like a beginning of year assessment screening. So in the fall, all students K-5 take the DIBELS assessment with the assigned subtests that are recommended by both the state and DIBELS producers of the assessment. And when we have that data collected, I sort of aggregate that data and sort by a subtest that we've already determined are measures that most indicate need for intervention. And I sort that from lowest to highest, regardless of school, to really note what are our lowest quartile of students, who are they, where are they, what kind of supports exist for them already, and what might we need to add in as a support or layer of touch point for them going forward. I then meet with the reading team, so the interventionists that do the assessments, who have a better idea of who these students are and what's going on more locally. And we have a discussion around caseload numbers, what that might look like schedule-wise, and then that information goes to building administration to discuss, again, even more granularly, what that looks like for students over time. And then that information and those supports are offered to families with the data that was collected, and what next steps we're offering as a district. And then conversations ensue around what that looks like, any questions they have related to any longitudinal information they might want to see. And then from there, on a more holistic level, common planning meetings take place at each grade level. And I'm often invited to those meetings to go over a teacher's class as a whole, and then we look at instructional groupings and what resources are there for in the classroom tier 2. And then, as I mentioned, we have worked the last couple of years to make this data readily available to families so that they can see firsthand as part of their student's profile.
On the next slide, we get a little bit of a glimpse into an example of what the support with teachers that I would do in the middle of the school year with the winter iReady diagnostic data might look like. Kat made reference to common planning time as a great resource and opportunity for us to get face-to-face time with a small team of teachers at the same grade level in a particular elementary school. And I alluded to that earlier, talking about kind of the MCAS item analysis. This is a screenshot on the left side excerpted from a class level growth report from the iReady Diagnostics, sorted by students who at the top with a solid blue bar have already exceeded the growth that was predicted for them from the beginning to the end of the year, all just in the time frame from September to January. And then as we go a little further down, we see some examples of students who grew very little during that interval. This report also includes kind of what their starting or baseline placement was in the fall and where it is now in January. And so this report allows me to make sure and help teachers to acclimate and understand what they're looking at. We look for opportunities to find students who may not be their highest performers, but have demonstrated impressive growth from the fall to the winter. So I bulleted that as find students to celebrate with high growth. And then we do want to kind of dig in a little bit to individual students who may not have grown much to try to figure out if, what might explain that. And there's still some reassuring things that this data is showing. So the second, sort of on the right side of this slide, screenshot is in the overall placement and then placement by each of those 4 domain areas that I mentioned before. And what we see in the case of this particular student is that they maintained grade level placement in 2 of the 3 areas that they started with it in at the beginning of the year. They moved impressively up in number and operations, which is one of the priority domains, and that was offset or negated a little bit by a drop in geometry, which is not uncommon. There's not much grade level instruction that happens in geometry in 3rd grade from the beginning to middle of the year. And it's also happens to be at the end of the diagnostic assessment, so students tend to lose a little engagement. And so sometimes that subscore is a little bit of an anomaly. And then we'll look and see, because the path of lessons is determined by their placement. Is this student getting lessons, for example, in geometry that are below grade level and not a good use of their time? And I work with teachers to essentially make appropriate adjustments to maximize that learning experience for that student. So just looking at the growth itself can be a little bit, if not deceiving, then maybe not quite as informative as a little bit of a deeper dive. And most importantly, especially in the winter of the year, the middle of the year, we want to not overreact to things that we're seeing. It's a good opportunity to kind of look in, celebrate the wins, and see what's going on with the students who are not showing the amount of growth we would expect.
And similar to the assessment list that we had for the elementary, as Brian explained, a lot of these are the same. The one difference is, and this is an error I didn't catch, but where you see diagnostic iReady for ELA for middle school, it should say administered 3 times per year to all 6 to 8 students. So we tried to remain consistent with our wording, and in that way, I didn't catch that, so I apologize. But that is something we do at the middle school as a way to, because at that point, the normed assessments available for students in middle school as it relates to ELA, we don't really call it a screener. We assume and have experience that we've screened students up until middle school. And really, middle school is where we move more into the diagnostic to see which skills are they exhibiting they're stronger in and which skills are they exhibiting they're not as strong. And so we use that data to inform as teacher teams in the English department, similar to the elementary that I described. You know, are there students that are newly identified to us as maybe needing some intervention? Are there students that maybe were recommended for a reading support period class in their schedule that we might need to cycle them off of because they're showing that growth? And we use this data along with classroom summative data and more diagnostic once that student has been identified. Now, how is the data being used? So for the middle school, we administer, as I said, the iReady reading diagnostic 3 times per year. We adjust student schedules as necessary. We often balance out once, you know, if a schedule does need to be adjusted, we ask ourselves a series of questions in terms of, does this student have the opportunity to take an elective, which at the middle school level is a very important rite of passage as well as a motivator. And so we balance out with guidance counselors, families, and student input as much as you might need a reading support class. Does that take away a layer of the rest of your day? So we do some negotiating that way. As Brian talked about with the MCAS item analysis, the same is true for the middle school. Something that we do is at the very beginning, our first or second department meeting, both for math and for ELA, and Christie and science as well. We look at both sets of data. So teachers will get their item analysis for their previous students to look at how did my instruction impact an item analysis and where in the curriculum did we get it really right? And where might we need to adjust our pacing this year in response to what we saw from last year's data? So there's a curriculum implication there. And then we look at the data and item analysis for the current students that they're getting this year. So how did they do in 5th grade? How did they do in the previous school year? To see who are the students that will be sitting in front of us where we might need to adjust our instruction in real time with those students. So we look at it a little in that way in those two data sets with the different cohorts to impact our planning and instruction. I'm trying to see. Oh, and this year and going into next year, we have been adapting our Amplify assessments that have been, we found using Google Docs are a better experience for our students. And so we've been making appropriate adjustments to increase complexity of questions and refining the questions we're asking based on what we're seeing in other summative sources and what we know that students might need more support with, and infusing that into our teaching and assessment.
We've done and continue to do something very similar within grade level teams for math at Pierce. The curriculum that we use, the Amplified Desmos Math, comes with well-aligned mid and end unit assessments. And we have, since we adopted it now 3 or 4 years ago, mostly completed the revisions and tweaks that we wanted to make sure that we believed we were putting the best measure of student proficiency in front of our students, striking a balance between endurance and making sure they were long enough that they got sort of the testing experience that we feel is important for middle school students to get, while also being mindful to avoid sort of redundancies in multiple items measuring the same exact skill or concept. And so that's been a successful endeavor. The assessments themselves come with a scoring rubric, which is sort of a standard based idea around how we're scoring students' proficiency that have been well adopted across all 3 grade levels with this curriculum. And those sometimes just need to also be adjusted a little bit anytime we make any tweaks to the original version of the assessment. On the next slide, actually, there's one more point I wanted to make here on this one. This year in particular, although this dates back to last year as well with some of the with a student learning goal that many members of the Pierce Math Department adopted, was really kind of putting particular attention on students coming into their class, into their grade level, having fallen below meeting expectations on the previous year's MCAS, and in particular, those students who are in the sort of close to meeting, but just a little bit below that scaled score. We chose somewhat arbitrarily as 485 to 499, and it captures in any given year at least 50 and sometimes upwards of 75% of students who didn't meet or exceed expectations are within 15 scaled points of getting there. And so last year, many of the teachers adopted a student learning goal around just kind of looking at the scores once they're available from the end of the school year that they've taught of those students who were identified the previous year. This year, we've kind of built that out within the math department to also be tracking their common assessment data over the course of the year and try to just give that little bit of extra priority and extra attention to these students. So if I'm an 8th grade teacher, I received at the beginning of the school year, the 7th grade MCAS scores, scaled scores of my students, and I filtered those out. Anyone that wasn't in that 485 to 499 range. And now every unit we go through, I'm keeping track of and reviewing the sort of accumulation of their and unit common assessment scores with the intent to really try to help get them over the hump and really see what there is that can be done, just little adjustments that can make a big difference. And obviously we won't know until the fall kind of how much that's paid off, and if it feels like we didn't do enough, we'll revise it again then as well. The next slide is an example of what Kat spoke about and I had alluded to earlier as well. This is an example of something that I would do throughout the school year with the 6th grade math teachers at Pierce. So kind of in the background is that item analysis document or sort of a screenshot from it. It shows a list of several items by description, by item number, by standard, and then by comparison, how we performed relative to the state on each of those items from the 2025, so last spring's 6th grade MCAS. And what we're looking for here are where are the items that we performed significantly better than the state, and does that reflect that the way in which our curriculum addresses that standard is sufficient, is effective. And we have now 3 or 4 years in a row of being able to make this analysis and comparison so that we're not just kind of getting lucky one year and then paying a price the next. And then we sort of pair this with the actual items that DESE releases to us that were on the test itself. And in the case of the highlighted top row there, that question that 87% of our 6th graders got correct last year, we can actually see what that item is. And we can do a few things with that item. We can kind of anticipate where students, if they were one of the 13% to answer incorrectly, where might they have gone wrong. And then we'll, even if we don't necessarily include it or add it into the common assessment within our ratios unit, we'll build this into some review, some practice, and we'll expose students in the process to what actual items that were given just less than a year ago actually look like. So we do this basically unit by unit. We analyze how we've performed on this in the past, and we then look to see what items the state has released and made available to us. And especially with a topic that's really important that we've had students struggle in before, we'll sort of be more intentional about incorporating some of those actual items into our instruction. And now that we're into April and the MCAS dates are coming up in May, we'll be even more purposeful about incorporating this as a spiral review exercise for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders before they sit for the MCAS next month.
get up to high school, half of this is going to look familiar. We have the formative assessments, and we also have the MCAS. The only difference with the MCAS in the past couple of years, it went from being a requirement for graduation to being required to take it. But we are still using that data, as I'll talk about in the next slide. But there are also two different categories in here. We have the SAT and PSATs that students are taking, and 10th and 11th and sometimes 12th grade. And then we also have the AP exams, which are going to be grade level courses that students can elect to take. And that's another standardized test that we use in part of the data. We can go on to the next slide. So how are we using it? The non-standardized ones we're using in terms of what we've done. This is going to be our third year doing it at the high school. We have more traditional final exams that you may remember, as used to be common in high school, but we're doing them not just as traditional final exams, but we're doing them as bigger project-based ones that are trying to sum up all of the standards that we're looking for. For example, in ELA, we're going to have a formal writing component, we're going to have a critical thinking component, and then there's going to be a speaking and listening component, all related to tying together things that they've done, and those all vary by each grade level and are designed to get to more challenging with each grade level as they go through in ELA. We use that data in our first meeting back in the fall to go over, and we do this both at grades 9 through 12, all of the teachers as a department, and then each individual grade level the teams meet. It's a little trickier because unlike in middle school, none of my teachers are teaching just one grade level, so the 9th grade teachers are also going to be in the 11th grade teacher meeting, or they might be in the 10th. So there's a little bit of overlap in those meetings, but it tends to work out well. And the data that we'll use from that will be how we talk about what sort of changes we want to make to the curriculum for that year, and then what that end of the year assessment is going to look like that following May. Then we'll get the MCAS in early October, I believe, or late September, and we'll sit down and I'll show an example of that on the next slide. And we'll do the same thing that Brian and Kat were just talking about. We do an item-by-item analysis. And we especially focus on the ones where the students weren't doing well. We dig in and try to figure out why, and then we adjust our curriculum based on that for that year. Then the PSAT and SAT data is largely used to help students learn where their own strengths and weaknesses are. We also use it to inform students of their AP potential, which is a formula that College Board uses, which says for each individual student, you might be successful in this, and this AP, and we give the students that information when they're making their choices on what courses they want to take as they're planning their high school course or the program of studies. The final one is the AP one that we use, and Brian, when I'm done, if you want to talk, if there's anything different about how it is in math, but at the English level, we have one 11th grade AP and one 12th grade AP. And for those, you do 9 through 12, it's just those AP teachers sit down and look and do an item analysis, because again, you'll have the questions released, and they'll say, oh, here are the ones that our students did not do well on. How are we going to adjust the curriculum for that? And that's just for those specific courses, whereas the MCAS and the common assessments, we sort of look at that at each grade level. Here's what we're going to do at 10th, 11th, and 12th because of what we saw happening at 9th. And then my next slide is just a very specific example of this year. One of our lowest scoring items was one where the students had to read a excerpt from the Odyssey, and their scores analyzing the Odyssey were fine, but then they were given a poem that was related to the Odyssey, and they had to talk about how the effects of that poem tied in to impact the message of the Odyssey, and they struggled with that. So we looked and saw we sort of maybe been not doing enough poetry at the 9th and 10th grade level, so we increased it this year. So they're going to have more exposure so that they'll be more comfortable and have more experience with those types of questions when they pop up. And that, I think, brings us on to our challenges.
Can start.
Yeah. So some of the challenges, as we discussed, our use of data across the three levels, is that as you can imagine, we've listed and talked about a lot of assessments, and it kind of could feel like that's all we do, and that's not the case. But the administration of some of the standardized assessments does take up a lot of instructional time, as you might imagine. It doesn't always capture a full or accurate measure of learning in isolation, which we don't you know, you heard how we used them all, and really, when you take them all together, they build a picture of a student learner profile. But the actual logistics of administering it can be cumbersome as related to instructional time. As Brian talked about, the best work that we do with elementary teachers in particular is when we get to meet with them in school-based grade level teams. But there are 24 teams across the district in the 4 elementaries, and there is a logistical challenge when it comes to trying to catch everyone in that way. Similarly, but in a different way, the structures at the secondary level with the team model up here is in the bell schedule do limit the opportunities for flexible student grouping and targeted interventions. So I mentioned that at the middle school, when students take iReady, and we may get some different information than teachers have seen in the past, we do have a conversation about adjusting schedules, and we take that seriously because that occupies a student's there's a slot every day that student will change what they're doing, and that does create a challenge.
I'll pick up there just with, we thought it made sense to kind of identify some high school specific challenges. So H mentioned a couple of these MCAS related already. It is no longer a graduation requirement the way that it was. So we're mindful of whether that impacts student motivation to perform at their very best, their effort. We didn't necessarily see that last year, but it's something that we're concerned about. I know all high schools are. That's sort of.
And on that front, we've got an incentive at least out for ELA where we started offering the seal of biliteracy this year. And for a student to get the seal of biliteracy, they have to achieve a certain score on the ELA MCAS. So that just helps them take it more seriously if they're a student who's interested in that.
Kind of related, the MCAS in 10th grade for ELA and math, unlike in each of the other levels, is not grade level specific. It's sort of a blurring or blending of content standards that are met in 9th and 10th grade. So it's not quite as straightforward to sort of like own it. Like H said, sometimes we have teachers teaching 9th grade but not 10th grade, or only 10th grade, not 9th grade, or neither. And it's certainly attainable, but it's a little bit of a different process that leads to identifying from MCAS data where the holes in the curriculum might be. H gave a good example from his department, but it's interesting that they are so specific, at least for math, in terms of what is supposed to be taught during the course of each grade level, K through 8. And then it gets a little nebulous from there on. So we're constantly having to kind of keep adjustments and changes that are being made at early high school in mind, but also not at the expense of what we know is needed for success in 11th and 12th grade. Regrettably, there really are, to this point, pretty limited options that are developmentally appropriate and sort of aligned well to curriculum at the secondary level, in particular at the high school. So where iReady continue, it feels like, to give us meaningful data in its use at elementary. We moved away from it at the middle school because it was taking up a lot of instructional time and not getting much what we felt like was useful, informative, or accurate data in return. And we honestly haven't even efforted it at the high school because in the limited pockets where we've seen it, it's not been fruitful. And so the need still exists, but we're not interested in just doing something for the sake of doing something. It needs to be something that will get high school age students to buy into, that they'll see value in, that the teachers can use and to inform their own instruction and help to truly identify and close whatever gaps in learning there are that exist. And sort of until we identify that, I think our best course of action is to continue to hold off. And then just with regard to SAT, I mean, this is probably intuitive, but coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty about what role, if any, the SAT would play in the college application and admission process. Test optional was for a couple years kind of the norm, and it sort of started to shift back to the way it was pre-pandemic. And so we're seeing slightly increased numbers of our students interested in participating in the school day SAT. And the more students who participate, the more useful those results become as a reflection of the quality of instruction and learning that's happening in their classrooms. It's not unlike the MCAS, though, the SAT is not aligned to specific courses or necessarily specific curriculum. It's the College Board's idea of what students should know roughly 3/4 of the way through high school.
Why we find the AP data a lot more useful because it's aligned to specific courses so that you can much more accurately judge, did we teach this well, and if not, what do we need to do? Whereas with the SAT, you're often guessing what they're going to end up testing, not in the global sense, but in a very specific sense.
Then on our final slide here, we just want to share what each of our next steps is within our departments. Specific to math, although this does spill over to ELA at Pierce, we're continuing to reevaluate the role that iReady plays in our assessment and instruction suite. We're particularly got some concern feedback from many teachers in different pockets in the winter administration, and feeling that maybe that data was not as useful a reflection of where their students are at that point. So we're looking closely at that. And much like I said about the high school, we're not interested in either spending the community's money or, more, I think importantly, our students' time taking an assessment that isn't going to give us something really rich and valuable and informative in return. So it's appropriate to constantly evaluate the way you're approaching assessment, and not be afraid to make changes and difficult choices if there's a need to. And then this is pretty specific to math. I'm looking to incorporate more assessments that sort of spiral through multiple different topics. I described our common assessments currently in practice, and this is true at elementary, middle, and high school, as being specific to the most recent content that was instructed on unit or module, and that is leaving a gap between that experience for students and the MCAS, which is sort of a free-for-all, any topic from any point in the year. September, didn't even get to it yet, could be assessed on the MCAS. And so my next goal for each level is to incorporate more spiral assessments that not only measure whether students are proficient on what they've most recently learned, but have they retained it, which is always a concern in math.
And as I shared at my last visit with you all, we're very excited about the new ELA curriculum coming online. The suites of assessments that are available to teachers will help to more accurately illuminate where student gaps are and where the successes are. And really, the module assessments will be consistent across the district, and we're already talking at grade level teams about how to make that happen in a real smooth and seamless way, and what that analysis will look like. You can also, some of them are online, so you can disaggregate by standard and school group, and so that will be a big next step for ELA in general. And as Brian was saying, just the refinement of unit assessments, as I look more to the 6 to 8, we're always looking at, where are we hitting the mark? Where might we need to dig in more? Making sure we're assessing what are the things that we're teaching, and especially, using the multi-assessments to more accurately assess where students are. Unlike math, these ELA standards are very generative, and they're similar year after year. So it can be a little, I don't want to say more difficult, but it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what they're demonstrating. Is that a true gap, or is that an off day? So just always looking at that to use for deeper analysis in our department meetings each cycle.
We talked about end of year course assessments.
Covered that. So that was a lot, but that is everything. So if you have questions.
So first of all, I want to thank the three of you, and I don't know if Collar wants to speak as well. The hope was that and I think you delivered on that, is what kind of assessments do we use? how do we use them and why? And how does that help us measure what's happening for mastery from a inter-year, from, September to winter to spring, but also over the course of years, with the hope of seeing growth in each part of our school year, that ultimately we'll see growth in our summative evaluations, our summative assessments, like MCAS as an example. And exciting to know that in our learning walks, we've actually seen examples of this. We went into a great fifth grade class at the Tucker who used MCAS scores from the fall and decided that they were going to shape their grade 5 writing lessons connected to science. And the teachers were getting together in their common planning time and talking about it and adjusting practice according to what the data said of that in their fourth grade MCAS and how they wanted to generate success for those students in fifth grade. We saw that at the Glover in math, where our fourth grade teachers and the math specialist were looking at the midwinter data and decided to shift the instructional schedule of our math interventionalists and spend more time in a couple of classes that had some students that needed to have certain topics addressed and readdressed in time for successful completion of the MCAS, knowing that that was areas of completion that they wanted. And also in middle school, I think I've talked about this one lesson 100 times, but the grade 6 science lesson where the word mastery was on the wall like 5 times, like the mastery, the looking for understanding, and all of our teachers using things like Google Docs and iReady for exit tickets, electronic exit tickets, or it could be a hand exit ticket. So we're really thankful that people are using data to inform instruction from a year-to-year standpoint, but also throughout the year, and making adjustments on behalf of what students need to be successful in any given year. So thank you for leading that work. Thank you for our new system where the data is actually communicated out to families. So when these midwinter data points are made, submitted to BVU, they go right out to parents. So it's communicated, it's there for everybody to look at and see. And if families have questions, they can always give a call. And I think teachers use them for their parent conferences as well. So always get better, you know what I mean? And the challenges and the things that you want to think about doing next year and the years forward are always helpful for us to know so we can support that as a school committee and as school administration. And I want to thank you for all that work. I appreciate it.
That and thank you, each of you. We should be really grateful to all of these 3 people who are dedicate their work to really looking at what we do in all aspects of their content area. And I learned a lot from each of you, and thank you. And I really appreciate the fact that the 3 of you are constantly looking at practice and trying to figure out what are we doing, what can we do better, what can we let go of. And to your point, Brian, if we're doing an assessment that doesn't seem to be giving us something, maybe we need to look at something else. So I appreciate that piece. I also appreciate the work that you're doing on common assessments. I think that's a huge aspect of understanding student learning is making those common assessments a reality in as much as possible. So thank you for all of the work and explaining it all to us. And I'm excited to see what comes next. Questions, I guess.
But come on.
I know.
We understand it was data.
It was, at one point I was like,
It's getting warm in here.
I have a couple of things. I'm Milton, by the way, for coming in. Just a couple of little things. You mentioned that the seal of biliteracy is contingent on meeting some benchmark on the MCAS ELA. Is there and sort of a clever way to incentivize focusing on that test and taking it seriously? Is there a math equivalent, math equivalent that we could consider for
The
this?
triliteracy stamp.
Yeah, triliteracy, yeah, exactly. Math literacy, I don't
There
know.
are scholarships connected to performance on the 10th grade MCAS. I don't know if they're subject specific or combined. There's the fact that we have such popular teachers in the math department at Milton High School that students rarely want to let them down. So the pep talk goes a little bit further, I think, maybe here in Milton than it does other places that I've been. But no, nothing specific like H described with the seal of biliteracy for math.
the carrots we dangle out in front of them, there are these scholarships that you can win based on your combined math and ELA scores. And then there's also the syllabi literacy that you can earn based on your world language and English scores. That's what the state offers right now, and we're maximizing everything that they let us use.
That's great. Okay. And then I'll probably butcher this a little bit, but you're talking about how you pay special attention to students who are scoring 15 points below the meeting expectations cutoff, and you track them. Is this it seemed like a simple yet sophisticated approach to sort of zeroing in on students who have high potential for getting over that benchmark. Is that you said you won't know the results until next year, and I couldn't tell if that meant this is a new strategy, or if you were just saying teachers won't know if it's working until they take the
you're dependent on the new data, which won't be available to them until those students have moved on to the next grade level, so it's not real time. But the idea of trying to identify students who are performing below grade level, which I guess is how I would describe a partially meeting or not meeting MCAS score, although again, I think it's important when we're talking about data, especially around MCAS, AP, SAT, iReady, this is 1 day or 2 days. So there are explanations for why students don't score consistently or what you would expect them to, but that's not an excuse to dismiss them all outright. But so scores that students who are not able to demonstrate meeting or exceeding of MCAS, especially those that are just below that benchmark, with some extra attention, we believe are going to get kind of over the hump, if you will. And that's sort of the purpose behind it. We used to focus more on students that were, when we used iReady at the middle school for math, that were performing just slightly below grade level. We'd use iReady as that sort of carrot, that goal that we would try. But as I mentioned before, it wasn't the students were not inclined necessarily to buy into that tool, so we weren't getting what we felt like were accurate results out of it. If they're not accurate, then what have we accomplished? I did just want to circle back to your first question. I mean, I think it's also worth noting that in my experience in Milton, most students, just by virtue of putting their own name on something, are trying their best on it. So even if they don't, I mean, not a lot of students were in jeopardy of not getting their diploma before with the 10th grade MCAS. So I'm not entirely surprised and won't be surprised if we see consistent results. I think, maybe beneficial that they don't have that little bit of tiny pressure that if things go really bad for them, that they might have to take it again. I think it's important to note that is the sort of culture of our schools, is that students generally want to do their best, regardless of what the reward is.
One of the biggest fears we had when it first became not a requirement was, are students just going to sign in and then 5 minutes later shut it and say, I'm done? And that's not happening. They're all in there for the same amount of time that they were in there working on the test beforehand, which is a great sign.
Hi, thank you so much. This is a great presentation. I appreciated the information that you shared and the examples. I did have a question. I know Dr. Fish was at our last meeting and he was explaining kind of the 8th to 9th transition. And I was wondering some of these examples that you shared and your strategies, like how could that kind of help those efforts as well? It just would be helpful to kind of understand how you would use some of this to kind of bridge the gap and like kind of the lull that you're like the drop that you're seeing in from like, let's say from 7 to 8, for instance. Like how can we, I guess from your kind of looking at all this data, like it would be great to just kind of get your perspective on it.
Do you mean, which part of the, hi Anne, which part of the transition?
Because I know, like, getting students ready for 9th grade. So when we're looking at kind of the assessments and seeing where they're, mastering areas and looking at like the various data and saying, okay, we really need to focus on this and we need to focus on that. Like, and then just kind of like, how does that kind of play into, I guess, the 8th to 9th grade transition where there's, it seems to be a drop in terms of expectations of the high school versus where they are at the middle school.
I can jump in for math if you want.
okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Hi, Anna. So I'm really proud of the changes that we've made to our course sequencing at the high school, particularly in ninth grade. We created basically a drawn out 2-year version of our ninth grade integrated Math 1. We call Math 1A, Math 1B, that sort of allows space and opportunity for some of the students who I think you might have in mind who are really coming into ninth grade without a real solid foundation in middle school content. And we have data to support that. And we rely more so on what we're seeing in the day-to-day in the classroom and those common assessments that I described before. Students who are scoring really low consistently on those in 8th grade in particular, but sort of throughout middle school, even though they're matriculating up sort of chronologically, we use 9th and 10th grade as a way to sort of not pump the brakes entirely, but slow down to create space. And that has so far proven really effective. We have that first cohort that started in that course in 9th grade now in 11th grade, and they've succeeded as we had hoped into the next course, and they're positioned to take I shouldn't say any. They're positioned to take from a few different options a college ready course in 12th grade, which was our goal, to be able to say that if you go through this pathway in this sequence, you'll be prepared to continue on with your education post-secondary if you so choose. The other thing that works really to the advantage of math is there is a fair amount of overlap between the 9th grade content and the 8th grade content in particular. So even students that have some gaps coming out of 8th grade are generally well positioned to still be successful in our 9th grade course, whether they go into honors or college prep level. So we share the 8th grade MCAS data with our 9th grade teachers, just like I described before. They go in, filter out their own students, look at the students who have been performing in 8th grade below grade level in the MCAS or below meeting expectations, and do some of that concentrated, targeted support there as well. But we're, I think, well positioned, at least as far as math content goes, to make the transition smooth from 8th to 9th grade. And we don't see a lot of casualties from that experience.
Brian, connected to that, can you describe a little bit about how the district utilizes the calculus project and the high number of students participating in that, that are the high school age students? I think we had over 85 or 95 students in it last summer when I arrived.
Sure.
And how that might be a good leverage point for some of those students who are on that brink of being successful, and that might push them over the edge. And talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, thank you for that suggestion. So yeah, the calculus project is designed specifically to it's designed for several different reasons, but specific to summer, it's designed to preview content that students typically struggle with in the following school year, and they get this preview from our teachers or a certified teacher that's hired to instruct during the summer program. And so they're cohorted grade specific, starting with rising 8th graders. So students are identified and recruited to join the calculus project in the spring of 7th grade so that they can attend during the summer in between 7th and 8th grade. And that just continues to carry forward all the way up through senior year. It's an open enrollment program, so students who want to participate are able to, and participation during the school year includes access and opportunity for tutoring. We cohort calculus project members within the same sections of classes, which has proven through research to support performance in traditionally marginalized students from traditionally marginalized groups. And so just as John kind of alluded to, the calculus project serves as with the intended purpose to bring students kind of up along and matriculate successfully into the advanced level version of whatever course they're going to be taking, all the way up through AP Calculus in senior year.
And from an ELA perspective, Kat, what Bill reported on was the connection of trying a eighth grade
Oh, yes.
pilot.
Yep.
And also, right now, we're having teachers in ninth grade go down and observe teachers in eighth grade, and teachers in eighth grade will be going up to the high school to observe ninth grade classes, so we can really start to sink in,
Yep.
not just with curriculum, but also teaching strategies and how the students engage, et cetera.
Yes.
Which is all good stuff related to Anna Bill's presentation too.
And we've been using, so Bill Dr. Fish has that group working together, the ninth and eighth grade teachers. And so I've been using some of the information that they've developed in terms of what are things you expect out of a ninth grade in each course for ELA. And I've taken that information and built our department meeting agendas around that. Not exhaustively every time, but it's an item each week where we talk about, as we plan our final unit, what are some of the practices we can use at this point in the year? So we don't want eighth grade to become like ninth grade junior, because that's not, developmentally appropriate. But what are the ways in which at this point in the year can we elevate the expectations to mimic some of those practices? And actually, our books just came in today for that, and so we'll be able to actually have those in hand and just really, really start to infuse that into the practices from now through the end of the year. And it'll be great to then hear from H and his staff what that felt like for those students going in, both from a data-driven perspective, but anecdotally too. What are the things we're noticing about student behaviors in the academic sense? And do we see an impact in that? I'm sure that we will. I don't expect that this will not result in something positive. But if we can identify those levers that were most impactful, can we expand those, then say to a 7th to 8th grade or a 6th to, 7th or things like that, so.
And then anecdotally, one thing that came out of a professional development last year where 8th and 9th grade teachers got to spend a couple hours together talking, that Kat and I have talked about for some changes that are going to be made, is that there was a lot of more excerpt-based reading going on at middle school, and then they were immediately jumping into lengthy readings. So we're trying to figure out how to sort of make a bridge to do a few more longer readings in Pierce, and then sort of ease them into the longer readings when they get to the high school versus just throwing them in to the deep water right at the start.
And it's that balance too, because we heard from H, a stumbling block of the MCAS was that they got an excerpt from a separate poem that they then had to compare and make connections to. And that we've seen the last 10 years or so, that's sort of the direction of how we consume reading material, which is why there have been these swings in curricula being offered and what's sort of high quality and what, so I think what it leads us to know as you look at the long-term educational, waves we've been riding is that there is a balance to be struck. And I think, because I'm not at the high school, it's important for us to keep that line of communication open.
Oh, I really appreciate this, and I appreciate all the work that is going into all of this, and we want to be able to support you as much as possible. So when you kind of figure things out and look at what's not working and what is working and where you need to make changes and where you need support from the district, we want to make sure that we support you as much as possible in making any tweaks that you need to so that our students can be successful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I definitely feel like I've noticed just the past couple of years, the increased sharing of the diagnostics, the data, at least at the elementary level, which I've really appreciated. I mean, it really was not that long ago that honestly it was practically impossible to access your students' data. From a parent perspective, it felt like. So it's been a huge progress. And I also love this taking a 30,000-foot view on the process of how you're working with the data. I think that's really helpful, not just for our school committee, like you were saying, Anna, but for the community to sort of, often when we're at this table talking about the data, it's like we're talking about the actual data, and we're hearing the analysis of the data more so than the work that's thoughts going into it, so I'm really appreciating that. I guess, I think even during this most recent conversation to the questions, I've started to maybe get answers to the question that I was sitting with kind of during the presentation, knowing that the goal, the priority rather, that you're highlighting here is the increased use of data. So I think I was, in listening to you share all those great practices and examples, I think sometimes you seemed to allude to, and just in the past few minutes, like pinpointing things that are new and different this year, compared to like how you've done things last year or the year before. But I was just wondering if there was anything else you would highlight, maybe that you shared, but I wasn't sure what that you were sharing is like, this is just how you've been doing it versus this is something you've started to do this year as part of increasing the use. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, I think,
Are there any concrete
Right.
things, I guess, you've been doing new? And how have teachers been responding to those, I guess, is my question. Like, what seemed to be the most promising for you, new practices that you're putting in place?
The most promising one, which is so brand new that we haven't, the teachers haven't even started to go and look at, is the 8th to 9th grade transition that we have.
Yeah,
So the teachers actually going in from the high school to the middle school and the middle school to high school to see what's going on, I think is going to be really instructive and useful for them. So that I would call that is the newest of what we're doing. Certainly the MCAS that we talked about, that we've been doing all along. So that is not new. To be able to try to get more time to do that as a department would be a new priority that I would try to push for, because we don't get a lot of time to do it, so we tend to only hit the major issues. I'd love to have time to go deeper into it and get to a more global analysis and not just focus on the problems.
yeah, I'd say granularly, the 6th grade ELA team this year, something new that they've infused into their units is they're calling them MCAS mini writes. So starting at the beginning of the year, writing is just globally, a skill that is very complex and is hard to, the mastery piece of it as measured by MCAS is a really challenging domain. And so as we looked at the writing and the teachers were reflecting on it, they have enacted periodic, I don't want to quantify it exactly, but periodic MCAS mini writes where it's a cold read of a prompt that they might see that's been a released item from MCAS, and they do just an on-demand writing. And then the teacher will give feedback and they'll reflect on it and discuss, what was challenging about it, why did you get a 2 and not a 4, what that might look like. So that's definitely something new this year. And a similar example in 7th grade, they're developing a new unit at the end of the year because they found a gap in certain, skills and standards. So I think there's not like wide sweeping newness. I think we're refining the processes that, as described, we've been doing for a while, but each year kind of finding a new way to make it actionable. I think that's sort of the key that we've talked about at the leadership level. Is sure, we have all this data. Yes, we look at it and we analyze. Are there things we could do to lead more actionable items? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no, we're going to keep staying the course. And I think this idea, as Carla was talking about, common assessments, we do have them. I think we can always be refining the work and looking at, there might be reasons to have different assessments at different times. It's just all about what is the purpose of that assessment. I think that's a big part of what I do. I don't want to speak for everybody.
Yeah, I think when our leadership team constructed those priorities, we were not super attentive to exact language that was chosen. I think, and that's not a criticism, it's just that under the umbrella of increased use of data to inform instruction doesn't inherently mean new assessment tools or additional assessment tools. To me, my interpretation and how I've implemented that within the departments that I support, for one, the example I gave about the iReady Winter Growth deep dive, that making that a district priority incentivize more teachers to seek that collaboration with me. So the practice itself may not, I mean, I've tweaked it. I mean, I could, I could talk all night, but, the sort of incentive for this to be a focus area meant that, I could be more valuable to teachers in a broader way this year than maybe I would have been in previous years. And Kat alluded to this also, we're constantly revising, refining, or adopting new curriculum materials. In the case of math for this year, we have the newer version of the ninth grade or the high school curriculum that we adopted a few years ago. And with that comes new and improved assessments. So it's not, I don't know that I could describe that as an increased use of data to inform instruction, but certainly better data, more purposefully and consistently applied.
That's like really, I think, what I was trying to get at, which is not increase as in quantity of data per se, but just like the use is what's being increased. Like you're working with maybe with more teachers in a way you've similarly worked with fewer teachers in the past, or like I think that's helpful also for the community to hear about, is that you don't always need like a brand new assessment to improve this work and drive it forward. Like it can just be, you know, and I liked how you framed, Brian, earlier, this idea of like looking for those high leverage, like I forget how you phrased it, small tweaks that can lead to big gains, like being strategic. I think you were talking about that in terms of like students' data.
Yep.
But it seems like that's kind of what you all seem to be doing.
Efficiency, yeah.
It's like seeking one of those practices that you can maybe bring people's focus towards that might not be like a new tool, but that might just be a way to like maximize what can be learned or made through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Approach seems to be like really.
appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think we're mindful of the difference in the experience and responsibilities of a classroom teacher. And if we're not there to provide some expertise and some focused and targeted work, then it is less likely to happen, or at least to happen well and consistently. So, I mean, I think that's a huge aspect of our roles, and ones that both are enjoyable, fulfilling, and try to be effective at.
Could I add, yeah, you go ahead about.
I was gonna
you go
say,
ahead, yeah.
let's see, in terms of increased use of data, another layer is that we did, for lack of a better phrase, plug and play goals for evaluation, that some teachers, K to 12, chose, I'm gonna just focus on using more data. So that's another layer that teachers accessed to kind of dig in. They found an interest in that and they wanted to dig in some more. So just another layer.
And when we met with them, all teachers in the fall and then all teachers in March, we asked them, what do you need to be successful in these 5 areas? And teachers said to us, we need more help with actionable, we're looking at data, we need actionable steps and support with that. So we met and talked about what are the different menu items we can give them to be able to give them tools. So the motivation of staff to get involved and take part at a higher level is we're shining a light on it. We have support being provided to them. We're getting meeting time. And then when they say we're really into this, but we need some help with these certain things, then we go out and try to find those things and give them to them. And it's just a professional relationship of really being attentive to the needs of our staff when they say we need some help with this and we want some, and then turning around and providing that in the next professional development day. And I think they've been responsive. The leadership team has been exceptionally responsive to meeting every day with teachers in their rooms at these grade level meetings and department meetings. And but also the cycle of feedback that they're giving us and the responsiveness to that. I think Carla did a great job, and the leadership team and the PD team did a great job of being respectful of that. And that I think that energy is good energy that is the difference maker of people taking part at a different level or a high level, along with a lot of other things that are going on in the district. It's a great staff. And I want to acknowledge that at the elementary level, we have assessments and reading assessments in our French program. And our world language does similar work as well. And that on behalf of Christy, for her K-8 work in science, a lot of good work is happening there that looks the same as well as at the high school as well. So just because science and world language and social studies with Barbara are not here, these practices are embedded in how all of our content areas are starting to approach the work.
Thank you very much again. Quick question on screeners for math, because I know we have DIBELS for ELA. Do we use any screeners on math for multiplication fluency, things like that that are really foundational for being able to access to higher levels math? And
No, but one of the concerns that we have with iReady is that it doesn't actually provide that same level of sort of what you're describing is kind of grade level agnostic a little bit. I've seen different versions of numeracy screeners. They're a little bit more arduous to administer, but that's not a reason not to do it. But we don't currently have that in place, but we're in my work with the math interventionist team, Mr. Phelan alluded to one of the math interventionists, Meredith Kempfick Glover, who had been in a third grade classroom during one of the learning walks that he participated in. But across that whole team, we are seeking a screener that can be used to drill into really where students' number sense is lacking, because that tends to be, among other things, sort of the biggest barrier to their success as they move forward through elementary content. And what the students that they have on their caseloads have most in common is a sort of call it gap or missing connection of numbers, numeracy, number sense. So it's very appealing to be able to measure that. It's very appealing to make instructional decisions and targeted intervention decisions using that tool. We've actually found iReady to be pretty limiting in terms of identifying students as candidates for intervention. A lot of times when we started that way, students would qualify for service, and then we get them into a small group and they actually didn't need the intervention that the interventionists were delivering. Yeah. They just kind of zoned out during the test. Or they had needs, but they didn't match the needs of the other students in the group, so it didn't give you that. So yeah, I think you're hitting on something that is a good next step that could drive our instructional model and support system for math at the elementary level.
Yeah, that sounds rough. So appreciate you looking into that.
Yep.
I think I assume that kind of carries into middle school too, and because you still use iReady. No, in middle school, iReady moves to an ELA assessment. It's not a math assessment. Is that
correct? Okay. We're looking to replace something that is supposed to be released in as part of the curriculum that we use already. It couldn't be more confusing here. So iReady shifts from math to reading between elementary and middle school. And the screener that we use for literacy, DIBELS, is put out by M-Class, who happens to also be the publisher of the new benchmarking tool that we will look closely at next year when it's available in 6 through 8, because it's embedded in our Amplify curriculum.
Yeah.
So we'll come back next year and generate even more questions than answers.
Think of
these names.
Maybe an infographic or something.
There's a Venn diagram here somewhere.
Somewhere.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate y'all's statements of like how we're using data to inform instructional practices, how we use that to raise rigor, all of those things. I think, I appreciate the questions from other members about the middle school, just in particular, given that's a place, I think, when we look at the data right now, student growth in particular, and the middle grades is not kind of keeping up with what I think we would all want for those kids, and certainly not even what we see in the elementary level. So just as a place of kind of continued focus and growth. I appreciate the work you're doing to identify screeners and diagnostic tools that allow us to assess what they're doing. I totally agree with your points too on if a metric test is not actually giving you any helpful data as it relates to pulling kids out and providing services, or even predictive as it relates to how they'll perform on the end of year, MCAS assessments, then it's not worth the time. And so I appreciate the critical eye with which you bring. I was thinking about some of the challenges you flagged. I was just wondering in particular, about the structures, the secondary level schedule that you mentioned. That's a huge challenge if you don't have the time and the ability to pull kids out and provide them the information. Even if the data is giving you good information, you can't do anything with it. So have there been discussions around schedule construction? I know DESE high school schedule work as like they have a whole department kind of trying to create models and work with districts on that type of stuff, particularly for this, like to create intervention blocks for students.
It's definitely a discussion in pockets, I'll say. I'll first say, teachers are certainly using their data, and I don't think you insinuated
I'm sorry.
otherwise.
Yeah, no,
No,
please,
you
no.
didn't, but I just want to say, like, they're using their data and pulling kids, that they know need extra, and doing that tier 2 within the classroom for sure. In terms of adjusting the model of the schedule, I know in 6th grade in particular, we've talked a lot about, just hypothetically, like what might it look like to think about where a wind block could fit in, how would we structure that? It's not, and I don't want to say it's raised to the level of, implementing that or codifying it with a schedule change as of yet, but it's definitely something we've talked about. I think there are so many implications for the impact of that on, the domino effect of that. In our leadership meetings that we have every cycle, we've raised that, kind of talked about it and thinking about how we could work within the current structure. We certainly find a lot of value in the rotating periods because it doesn't put the first class, that they have every day. If they're late to school, they're not missing, math every morning. So I think there's a lot more to determine before we could make a structural change like that. But it definitely is something that we've discussed. I don't know.
I just have a question because in middle school, from what I heard, is that there's a flex block in the middle of the day, every single day, and that period is actually longer so that the student rotate their lunchtime, and it's supposed to be also the time for students to seek extra help from teachers. So is that working for supporting the students?
It is. It's short. Is it 20 minutes, 15?
The advisory is 20. At the high school, it's called advisory. It's 20 minutes. So
Yeah.
it is a short period. Students do use it, teachers do use it with their students, but it's short.
Yeah, the hard part and the good part about flex is that it's flexible, and so it isn't dictated that on Monday it's math, go to your math teacher, or Tuesday it's ELA. It's more student driven, which was its intent and purpose, so that students could have agency over that period of time. But you are right, there is time built in there, and that's certainly been helpful for students to be able to access teachers during that time. Brian, if you...
Yeah, it's, I'm not sure its design was for like a full kind of what we would have as like a win or intervention block in mind. It's not really an instructional block of time in the day. It's meant as an opportunity to start to build some agency and some independence in our middle school students. That carries forward into what H described about the advisory. It's not to say it couldn't be repurposed for that, but it isn't currently serving that. Students certainly use flex time more if they have an assignment that they need to submit or a quiz that they need to, assessment they need to make up or something like that. Or they're have access to their teacher that they're with during that particular day, but who they're with and flex changes day to day based on what period the lunch block falls during. And like I said, the way it's been, it's in the schedule because of the necessity to have 4 lunches. And it's there with the current goal of just having students manage their time, have some choice in what they're using that to do. And so I think that it wouldn't be easy to repurpose it for an intervention or a win block, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen. And if not that, then we should be considering other alternatives. And I was gonna sort of jump into what you had said and recognize that this is not a unique Milton challenge, that secondary has constraints that elementary schedules generally don't so much. And so it would be well worth, I think, our while at Pierce to see what other middle schools have done to kind of make this possible and what the implications for doing so at Pierce would be.
It just popped into my mind that because we are doing this rotating schedule, so we're doing like different blocks, and then I assume that because of like performance arts and like in sixth grade we have the seminar classes, right? So I don't think they will meet every single day or every single cycle on all these F block, for example. So perhaps they only meet like once per cycle on the F block, and perhaps the student who are identified to need extra help in math and English could sign up for like a F block tutoring section, I guess, and student who does not need that can have a self-study class. I don't know. It's just an idea of how we can work it into this rotating schedule, because it seems like a lot of schools are going with rotating schedules. My school also does that, and it drives me crazy because I don't know what class I'm teaching. I have to keep looking at my Google Calendar. Otherwise, I was like, which class am I teaching today? So, but then we do have that kind of flexibility of having this rotating block that we can plug into different things, like self-study, like PAB, performance art classes, or computer classes and things like that. So, yeah. But thank you so much for being very reflective about the teaching and about the result that you guys got. And it is very promising to see the growth mindset that you three demonstrating right here with the presentation. I also have a few questions. Are you done with your questions? Sorry. You mentioned about how the K to 5, K to 8 actually, no, K to 5 have 3 tests, 3 screeners a year, right? But then we do have MCAS on 3rd grade, 4th, and 5th. And those MCAS usually administered in spring semester. Do you think we could just get rid of that end of the year screener for the iReady DIVO and just use the MCAS score to address what the gaps would be? And
Yeah, I can see why you'd think that. But in particular for Dibbles, and I can speak to iReady a little bit, they do drill in on some different skills. So for the Dibbles in particular, also in grades 4 and 5, the Dibbles is only 2 subtests, so it's quite brief. And the screener really is meant to be a 1 to 2 minute assessment to just make sure we're not missing some really foundational skills that students might be missing. Whereas the MCAS, we would not know if they're missing those foundational skills because they're more performance-based. It's asking them to do like reading comprehension, which involves like 27 skills, you know. So we wouldn't really know what the diagnostic problem is or challenge is. And so we do use Dibbles for a different, we couldn't compare their middle of year Dibbles to the MCAS because it wouldn't really show any growth or any regression. But I do see what you mean to try to reduce the amount of assessments we're giving. And we are legally obligated to give those through the Dibbles for the dyslexia screening law.
okay.
Yeah.
For iReady, I would have 2 reservations. One would be that you get the iReady data right away, where we really don't get MCAS data that can be analyzed. I mean, we see like a raw score in the summer, but we don't really get a full scope of how the student performed relative to how they had done previously. That SGP takes a little while to generate, and the item analysis takes a little while to generate. So it's usually into the next school year before we'd be learning that that student had performed below grade level, which feels like a long time to wait for that information. And the other, which is pretty specific and unique to iReady, is that each time that diagnostic is taken, it changes the learning pathway that the student goes. So I wouldn't expect too many students to spend much time during the summer on a device on iReady, but the option is currently available to them to do so. And so we'd have to find a way to try to replace that as an optional learning experience for students to have over the summer. It would still be available, but it'd be so out of date that I'd be worried that it wouldn't be purposeful.
So you're saying that over the summer, if students chose to use iReady as a summer work, it's available to them?
It is.
Lots of, yeah.
Yeah, until about mid-August, so about 2 weeks before the school year starts, the system shuts down so it can roll over for the new school year. I don't we teachers include that information to families in their newsletters at the end of the year. It's not without reservation because you don't want students sitting on a device in the middle of their summer, sort of unchecked or unsupervised, I guess, if you will. There's just, no math learning experience is meant to be done in isolation without access to a trained, knowledgeable instructor available. So, but it is something that is a perk and some students I know take advantage of.
Sorry. You guys mentioned about the scholarship connected to a 10th grade MCAS score. Do the students and family knows about that? Because this is the first time I heard about it.
Well, this is the first year we've done it.
Oh, okay.
We rolled it out and we communicated to the point where I was afraid that people were gonna issue a cease and desist order against us. But we sent a lot of information home. And in fact, there were the students at the high school, we just rolled it out for seniors this year. Next year, we're gonna be offering it to juniors and seniors. But any senior who qualified this year, who did not apply for it, I don't want to say hunted them down, but I hunted them down and said, why are you not applying for this? And explained to it what it was, because they didn't know what it was and they hadn't read it closely. So I've been doing a lot of education of what it is to the students this year. But we did send things regularly home to all the families, and I will next year also, any student that could qualify that doesn't sign up, I will go and ask them, like, hey, you should probably do this, do you want to? This is the seal of biliteracy. It's not a scholarship, it's from the state. It goes on their transcript, and it's very useful. It's a useful college application tool, and it's a useful job interview tool.
But information about the scholarships is also provided to 10th grade families before and during and after the MCAS.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
the Abigail Adams and the
Yeah.
Koplik, I'm sorry for getting the first.
Is it MFE, the scholarship from MFE?
So this is statewide. This is
Statewide,
available to
okay.
all Massachusetts public school
Oh,
students who meet a certain score. I mean, it's not, I don't think a substantial amount of money, and it might be that the Abigail Adams is only for students going to a public
school.
university. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
So,
Oh, okay. So the scholarship have been existed, which is given by the state for students who apply to a public college.
Correct.
Okay, and then the seal by literacy started this year for students who have passed a certain ELA score on MCAS.
Yes, and they also have to have a qualifying world language test score.
AP.
AP is one way to do it, but there are other ways to do it. And
Okay.
there's a number of alternative tests for students. If it's their home language, then they don't take an AP course in that language. They can still test on it and get the seal of biliteracy. And they can get it in more than one language if they're trilingual or.
To celebrate one of our student reps, Elias just successfully completed it in Latin.
Oh, nice.
Congratulate him when he comes back and sees us
Okay.
before he leaves, but really big deal for him.
So you guys mentioned about one of the challenge in high school level is that the teacher teaches multiple grade, and the teacher might not be able to go attend all the grade level meetings that one teaches. As someone who also teach 4 late levels at the school, and it's impossible for me to attend all the grade level meetings. So what we did is like 5th and 6th grade meeting, and then 7th and 8th grade meeting at the same days. So is there any way that the administration team can help with the easing this kind of meeting and spreading them out throughout the year in different day or different time, so that the teachers who teach multiple grade level able to attend these grade level meetings?
So I'll answer that question. This is an active conversation with our high school staff currently. That we're trying to figure out ways for teachers who teach like courses, like we both teach English 9, can we get together and have those conversations? And then teachers just in the department, whether it be math or English or social studies, where is that time? So that's part of what we're really having good conversations about when we think about structural shifts that we can try to make in order to support that challenge that this group brought forward. That's something that we're talking about with folks as well. So I applaud this group for not only letting us know what they do that works and that they're really proud of with their teachers and their students, but also what the challenges are. So when Anna asks, what can you do? It really is taking a good look at this list of challenges, finding out, is this a policy change? Is this a budget issue? Is this something we want to talk to our educators about through a schedule shift or however we do that? So these are all definitely things that are conversations that we're having. That you'll probably end up learning more about later in the meeting. But those are all active conversations. What are the vehicles for professional development? What are the vehicles for giving educators time to talk to each other about student data in order to support students in their endeavor of increasing their student outcomes is part of what we're always talking about for sure.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
I denied this the whole time.
Enjoy.
Thank you very, very much.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. I don't have anything under the chair's report tonight, so we will move to the finance subcommittee report.
I have no more time.
And
Right to it. Finance Subcommittee, I wasn't here 2 meetings ago. I appreciate Nathan providing the update. So again, in general, we are in a good spot with the FY27 budget. The next step is the town meeting presentation. So this morning we met school committee. We started talking about that a little bit. That'll be part of our conversation at the finance committee meeting next week, where we'll try and talk over a draft. And certainly as we're developing that, we'll share that with other members. I think what we initially talked about is we'll be taking a lot from what we presented to the warrant committee, which is slides we've previously shared with other members. And then again, just think about other ways that we want to adjust that for the different group that is town meeting, right? So that was one. The other thing we've been working on, as we've kind of reported to y'all, is the fiscal policies. And so 2 of those are in the folder tonight. We've been working on the Special Education Stabilization Fund policy. As a reminder, that is a joint account between the overseen by both the select board and the school committee. So to withdraw funds from that needs a vote from both of those boards. We've talked to the select board finance committee about this kind of within the context of the free cash allocation that they're looking to put into that and is on the town warrant for the upcoming town meeting. We had initial conversations, had some pretty good alignment, and we took on the step of, Katie took on the step of drafting a policy. Really big thanks to Katie. We talked about it at the finance committee meeting, sent that over to select board, got some feedback. What you see in front of you is kind of the most recent version from that feedback based upon conversation we had this morning with some final edits. I've sent that back over to the select board. We've gotten some initial feedback from them already that I think we're like 99% of the way there. We're just trying to figure out kind of some last kind of minute things around how we potentially allocate funds to the account moving forward. So we expect to have that flushed out before the next meeting, where we'll have the second reading of this policy. And I promise I will pause and read through the policy here in a second, but just wanted to give that overview first. And I'll pause here too before I jump into the circuit breaker. I think it makes sense to y'all. Maybe we'll just go into depth and I can read through the special ed stabilization fund policy, walk that through with y'all, make sure we're all good on that, and then we'll jump to the reading of the circuit breaker policy. Before I go and screen share and start talking through the policy, any other notes you want to provide, Amanda, Nathan? Katie, anything I missed? Okay. All right, well, then let me share my screen just so I'm gonna try and do my best Anna impression because she does a good job with these policy reads. So. Read through it and kind of talk to the purpose. So a lot of this is, the structure is kind of taken from what we've seen in other towns and what some other kind of sample policies were. That was kind of the initial statement. So it starts with the objective. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, special ed reserve accounts are allowed by Massachusetts General Law to allow savings to be set aside. So again, this section tries to say, you know, what is the purpose and what is the objective of this fund? It's to make sure we have savings to address unforeseeable special education costs and provide stability to the department. Okay. The goal, again, is kind of connected to that. Provide opportunity, a way to pay for those unbudgeted costs in a given year without forcing cuts in other school services. Obviously, that's something we've unfortunately seen in past fiscal years. We have a section here where we talk about the process for transferring in funds. So again, we've talked about this fund is really based within Mass General Law, that Chapter 40, Section 13E. You can Google that. It's not very long, but it lays out pretty clearly what this is. So we have identified in here the target funding ceiling. That's the maximum amount of money that can be in this account. We are tying that to what it states within Mass General Law, which is the fund cannot exceed 2% of annual net school spending within our district. And so Katie was able to provide kind of an example of net school spending from a prior school year. And so that is how they calculate it, and therefore we would. So that's an estimate of kind of what the current maximum funding level could be. We also try and set a minimum funding level, what we call the target funding floor, of $100,000 to ensure that fund does not drop below zero, or drop down to zero. And then we talk about a process of if the balance of fund does drop below that floor, the town and the schools must formulate a plan to restore the funds above that level so that there is something within there to give the school department buffer. It's identified to say do that within 2 funding cycles. We then talk through kind of the avenues for funding, which I mentioned before is a place we're still a little bit talking with the select board on. Our primary source for funding that a lot of districts use is free cash derived from the school department's budget ending the year under budget. So you might remember, like in the Q2 forecast that we presented, Katie was currently at that point projecting about like 26,000, right? So pretty darn close, but that's still $26,000 that we would have savings in that scenario. Potentially that $26,000 would be able to be allocated into this account, right? If we were under budget by that amount at the end of the fiscal year. So that's a pretty common way for this to be funded, in that it provides us incentive to be under budget, and it allows the schools to have a mechanism to fund it themselves without being completely reliant, needing to go to the select board and the town administrator for free cash allocation. Because free cash is tight, there's a lot of demands on free cash across the town. Yeah, please.
I'm not very good with numbers, so correct me if my understanding is wrong. So the example you gave is that like in Q2, Katie had already identified that by the end of the school year, based on the projection, that we will have these amounts of money left in our budget. So you're saying that if that is the case, then by that time, we will.
Not in Q2.
But at the end.
At the end of the year, if that happens,
Yeah.
if that's where we end up,
Okay.
then yeah, whatever that number is, if it's 12,000, because that's where we end up, or 30,000, whatever it might be, whatever that number is, if we are under budget, then that is funding that would go into this account to fund this account.
Okay.
Would be Q2 of the following year that would become certified as free cash.
Yeah, that's the piece that we're talking to the town administrator about. That was my understanding, is it would have to be certified as free cash, like any department that is under budget. It goes into free cash, has to be certified by the state, and then would have to be allocated to this account through a vote of town meeting, through a warrant article. That's why I assumed would need to happen. Town administrator thinks there might be other easier avenues for kind of automating this process, but that's a piece we're just need to tie the loose ends on. We 100% know that we could do it this way, the way I just laid it out. That is absolutely allowed. That's how town typically works, but there could be other avenues. So when we figure that out, we'll come back to you. I'll let y'all know. But the goal is still the same of whatever the school does not spend within its allocated budget from the town, that additional funding then could be pushed into this special ed stabilization fund. That's the goal. Yes, so the next line is, other undesignated fund free cash may be used to be transferred into the stabilization fund. That's such as the $500,000 that the town, the select board is looking to allocate into that fund this year. State there's obviously no mandatory annual contribution that has to be made. We're not committing the town to anything. And if we hit the target funding ceiling, even if we have additional funds, we aren't contributing anything else into that account because we can't. There's a line just kind of, it's pulled from the section 13E that says the town treasurer can actually invest those monies. So they don't just sit there unused, they can be invested and earn some income for the town, which is great.
Sorry. Who, if we decide to invest this money, who is overseeing that account?
The town treasurer.
The treasurer, I got it.
The town treasurer oversees all that.
Investment income can be deposited into the stabilization account.
And then we have clarity on how we would transfer out funds. This was something we really wanted to get clear on, to make it clear for future school committees and future select boards, given both those boards need to align on this, of how we would go about requesting funds out. And so it talks about kind of a reporting process to compare actual expenses versus budgeted expenses on a line item analysis, and it lists those particular line items that would be looked at and would be shared out to say, hey, this is budgeted this, it's actually going to be this, we are over, and this is why we need some additional funding allocated to this fund. Then we talk about the withdrawal procedures and say, again, that kind of, obviously the school committee will create a budget for each of those lines, which Katie has done already for FY27, so that's an annual part of the process. We can initiate a withdrawal request. The select board asks that we put a minimum amount, which we agreed to, of at least, it would have to be $50,000, which made sense to us. The withdrawal amount would be limited to what is the deficit. So it's $50,000 deficit. We can't ask for $70,000 additional funds. And then, you know, if we determine it is necessary, this board would need to vote to approve that, to make that request. We would then present that request to the select board. The select board would then have to vote to approve the request. Both boards both have to vote to approve it by majority vote. And we just have some additional information there around kind of confidentiality of student records. Obviously, we're talking about costs associated with it. Those costs have students behind them, as do every cost within our district. And so that's important to note, but it's also important to note that we cannot and should not be sharing kind of sensitive student information, as we're also having these kind of budgetary implications. So we'll be keeping the information kind of on the line item level. So that is the walkthrough, first reading of the policy. Other questions folks have?
So where it says that the select board votes on it, and there must be a majority vote, is there ever language around rationale for not approving the vote? Not approving the amount, like, as long as it is there any reason that if it addresses one of these 4 areas and it's minimally $50,000, that there would be a no vote in the select board?
There could be.
I guess, have you ever seen language in there that around a reason for not approving? I know that sounds like a weird question, but I'm just
Like, to require the select board to provide us a reason for not approving it, or?
yeah, I'm just wondering if it's $52,000 and it's for special education transportation. Is there would there, you know, if it fits that criteria, have you, maybe it's one of you ever run into a situation where it hasn't, or is it pretty much, not, I would never use, I'm not saying rubber stamp, but is this really typically just procedural in nature? Is that what you found?
I've never experienced a situation where it has not been approved. When I was looking at the different sample policies, which I think we had provided those samples in the finance subcommittee folders, I don't remember seeing any language. I would offer that you could potentially say no reasonable request could be withheld, or, I mean, there is some language that we could use, but I did not see that in any of the current policies that were, that I had found from other districts, so it's definitely,
Yeah, I would foresee it, especially since it's specifically for this. It's not like it could be used for anything else.
right,
So,
right.
it just popped up. Okay.
And I think that's why it's really important to have the policy that's reviewed by both the school committee and the select board. I think if both parties are mutually agreeing that the policy fits kind of the intent of the utilization of the funds, then would think that the hope would be that there shouldn't be any issues with us as long as everything's being followed.
Are there any other questions folks have on the policy?
Mark, not a question, just a last minute edit / question, but under the target funding floor section, it says that if we drop below the funding floor, we'll make a plan to get back into budget within 2 budget cycles. I assume budget cycle is synonymous with fiscal year, and I wonder if we should just say 2 fiscal years.
Right.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Great. Well, again, this is the first reading. We will, it's a joint policy, so we need alignment. I think we're 99% of the way there, so we'll work to get 100% of the way there. The goal is to have the second reading, John alluded to previously at our April 29th meeting, which is the reorg meeting. Typically, don't have too much at that meeting, but we're going to try and add this in there so that we can try and vote and have this policy in place prior to town meeting, given that there's a warrant article about funding this account. We'd like to have this share with town meeting if they have questions. That certainly was something that came up at warrant committee of, they thought we should do this. We agreed. We'd already been trying to work on it. So that is the goal and the reason for that.
Do you know what the timeline is for the select board to try to
They,
review this policy?
Winston kind of said offhand that he thought maybe they could talk about it next week. And so, but I'm not 100% sure what their meeting cadence, I don't know if they have another meeting scheduled, because they met last night. I don't know if they have another meeting scheduled before town meeting and all that. So I'm not 100% sure their ability. I think what I expressed in an email to Winston and Megan is, I think ideally, given the funds, even though they'd be allocated at town meeting, they wouldn't be accessible by anybody until July 1st, which is the point Katie made at her meeting. And so at least trying to hope that they would adopt this policy by July 1st, so that kind of going into a fiscal year where the funds, in theory, could be used if the school department needed it, that we start the year off with kind of the aligned policy. But I haven't heard about their ability to kind of meet that timeline. If there are no other questions about that, we'll move over to circuit breaker. So we mentioned to y'all, we've been trying to work on establishing some reserve fiscal policies across kind of all of our reserve accounts. Special Ed Stabilization Fund was one that moved up the list as the 500,000 was allocated. Circuit breaker is obviously one we've talked about a lot, and so that has always been really high on the list. So it's a similar format to the other one. Again, thank you to Katie for kind of putting together this draft, helping kind of craft this. So I will try and walk through this policy as well. So starts with that top, the objective, and why are we kind of funding this? You can see it's a different Mass General Law reference. Circuit breaker is kind of a different part of it, but still under Mass General Law. Talks about how the funds are directly deposited by the state into this account under the control of the school department. We withdraw them to support the annual operating budget. What we're trying to do is maintain a minimum rollover, right? That's what we've talked about within our budgeting practice. And have that minimum rollover and to maintain those funding. So that is kind of the objective. And then the goal, and kind of restates it a little bit more clearly, of we want that minimum rollover in order to provide offset the high cost of special education services that it can come up with for kids, and to make sure that we are having this so that we can increase utilization of circuit breaker if we need to for unexpected costs, cost increases from one fiscal year to the next. So that is the point of kind of building this, as we've talked about time and time again within our school committee meetings and our finance committee meetings. The transfer in process, so we talked about the target funding ceiling. For this case, it's 100% of the circuit breaker reimbursement, and that is the maximum allowed under Mass General Law, similar to the target funding ceiling for the Special Ed Stabilization Fund. We identified the target funding floor as being 75% of the circuit breaker reimbursement received from the state. So that's also kind of a number that we've talked about, what actually is an amount that really provides the school department robust number that gives some assurity for the unexpected. And so 75 is where we ended up as the funding floor. For the transfers out, it notes what these funds can be used for. Again, they cannot be used for anything. They must be used for very specific expenditures. And it talks about how to request to transfer out the fund in excess of proposed utilization. The school department has to give a report to the school committee showing why they will need to withdraw more from the circuit breaker, and compare kind of actual versus budgeted expenses. In that case, that's similar to the Special Ed Stabilization Fund. And lay down the withdrawal procedures. If the department determines they need the additional funds, they must receive an authorization to pull those funds through a vote of the finance subcommittee and a vote of the full school committee. And then that's if they want to pull any funds, even if it keeps the funding above the target floor. If they want to make a withdrawal below, that pulls it below the target funding floor, they must also at that point present a plan that shows how they will, we as a department and school committee will get the account back up to the funding floor, similar to what Katie and John have kind of presented previously on the 4-year plan at this point to get this account up to that target funding floor. And then we just talk about each year, codifying that each year the school department will report on the circuit breaker utilization again, as Katie has done last year and as John and Katie did this year. So that is a process we have been doing, but just will be codifying it within this policy. And we have a similar note on confidentiality of circuit records. So that's the circuit breaker policy. Questions?
So let me just paraphrase what I just heard.
Please.
So the circuit breaker fund comes in usually in the summertime?
It comes in quarterly. The funds come
Quarterly,
in
okay.
quarterly. Yep, throughout the year.
And so these funds, if they're not being used as planned, the actual money will go into this circuit breakers reserve fund.
The money is always, so it's money from the state, and it's always deposited directly into the circuit breaker fund. The unique part about this fund is that we can carry a full year's worth of funding into the next year. So we don't have to use the money. It's not like the operating budget that we have to use it within the fiscal year, and if we don't use it, we essentially turn it back to the town. We can retain up to 1 year of circuit breaker money in that account and carry it forward into the next year.
So this is the amount where we've talked about, like, we carried, this year, what we carried over was $8,000.
Yeah.
Right, which does not provide cushion for
Anything.
any unexpected costs, right? A
Yeah.
pizza party's even more, it's a fancy pizza party, I guess. But, yeah, so the goal is here to identify, as we've kind of talked about, what is the level we want to get that rollover amount to in order to provide some assurances for the department that they have mechanisms to address unforeseen costs around special education expenses, which are particularly difficult to foresee, given kids can move in and out of districts, needs of students change, and costs can be quite exorbitant in certain situations.
So can I understand this special education stabilization fund is the one that is already in the school year budget? That is already predicted in the school year budgets, the one that before, the first one that you
Yeah,
were talking about?
that's not in the school year budget.
That's not in the school year budget?
That's in a separate account that sits there, similar to like a reserve account that the town has for what's called a rainy day fund, right? So that is what that account is. It's completely separate from the school's operating budget. Circuit breaker, Katie, does utilize circuit breaker funding. I shouldn't say Katie, the school department and us within our budget utilize circuit breaker funding within the school budget on an annual basis. How much we utilize can vary from budget to budget based on what we get from the state, what we choose to utilize versus not utilize in order to build up this reserve. And so that was part of the conversation we were having within the budget cycle of, should we increase our utilization or not, based upon the needs of the positions that were at risk and the need to build out this fund over time. So that's the two different things. They are, both of them, I think that potentially some of the confusion you have, which is valid, is that both of them, their goal is to support addressing unexpected costs that arise from special education. They do that through different mechanisms. And again, the circuit breaker is a wholly school committee policy. It's an account that is overseen by the school department, school committee alone. And it's funded through allocations from the state. So not through anything the town does. Special Ed Stabilization Fund is a joint account policy overseen by both the select board and the school committee. And that is a fund that is funded solely by the town through free cash or other, through free cash.
Okay. The circuit breaker is a reimbursement, so it's a reimbursement of special education costs from the year prior. The way I thought about the Special Ed Stabilization Fund is circuit breaker is the one that you're using to fund ongoing funding for special education. I think of the other one as almost like in a case of emergency break glass. Do you know what I mean? It's like when it's over and above the anticipated costs and what we projected, something much bigger, something happens that just puts, that was completely unpredictable, that pushes the budget over. That's what you could use that money for. But the circuit breaker is sort of something more predictable because we know what we spent last year for reimbursement rate. So you can better understand it cover. That helps.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Nathan has said before, and we use the phrase the belt and suspenders approach to that, like, they're, one of these is the belt ones, the suspenders, they're both supporting the district in different ways and giving the district different avenues for addressing these potentially unexpected costs.
Okay.
So the goal here is these policies are meant to codify what these accounts are, what are the purposes of these accounts, and how are we looking at the funding of them, and how can funds be removed from them over time. Because in prior years, the circuit breaker account obviously was drained through, I think what we determined was not enough oversight and not enough conversation around that decision. And so this provides, I think, the school committee more ability to just make sure they are aware of what is happening with that fund. That there's good conversation between the department and the committee, as we've seen over the last 2 years, but in prior years it wasn't necessarily the same.
much clearer now. I'm not very good with numbers, so thank you for explaining this.
Any other questions?
All right, sorry, just quickly. We don't have to decide on this tonight, but the stabilization fund says that if we fall below the funding floor, we build it back up over 2 years. And I wonder if we should impose a similar condition on ourselves in this policy.
It's a good question. 2 years, the funding floor here is is higher, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it should be
75%.
2 years, but this doesn't have like a build back clause in it. And I wonder if it should.
Well, we have that they must present a plan showing how they will get the funding level above the TFF in future fiscal years.
Oh, we do?
Under the
Oh,
withdrawal
okay.
procedures. It doesn't say
How many years?
a specific number of years.
Yeah.
Which again, I think gives a little flexibility. I think within our, like, we had a 3-year plan and then we chose to elongate that to a 4-year plan. So, yeah, so exactly how many years I could vary based on the context. I think the $100,000 number is such a different level of a number, like the ability to fund $100,000 over 2 years within a $140 million town budget should be doable.
So I would only say, I want to thank Katie for the work last fiscal year and this fiscal year, for the work on the circuit breaker, and then working with the folks in the finance committee to prioritize this work. This was a big chunk of work that we said that we wanted to get done at the beginning of the year, and this is a real big concrete step forward for the district, and the community should know it's a really important piece of policy, both of these policies, that ensure supervision and a responsible way of spending that everybody would know about. If the needs arise, there has to be votes, there have to be plans put forward, and it's really good work and good business financial planning. So thank you to the finance committee, and thank you to Katie. The drafts and the different iterations of this that Katie explored and brought to the table have been really helpful, and the language is really tight. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to Katie as well.
Last thing for finance update is the warrants. The following warrants have been signed and approved. Warrant 39, dated April 2nd, 2026, the amount of $473,561.24. That one I believe I've sent to you all electronically. Also signed warrant tonight. I signed warrant 40, dated 4/2/2026, in the amount of $440,586.35. That one I have not sent to you electronically, and so we'll do so tomorrow when I get the electronic version. That's it for finance.
Thank you. MFE update.
Okay. So I attended the MFE Teacher of the Year subcommittee meeting last week, and we have looked at all the recommendations that come in through the Google Forms, and there's tons of recommendation come from parents, current students, former students, and also colleagues of teachers. So after long conversations within the subcommittee, we had over 12 people, I believe. We decided on 10 educators who are well deserved for those awards this year, and I have to keep them secret. So the celebration is going to be at each individual school is going to be on the 14th of this month, which is next Tuesday. Yeah, next Tuesday. So we'll hear about all those celebration at each schools from the principals, and also most likely from John's emails as well. So look forward to the educators that you admire to be awarded this year. That is one of the biggest news, and because we're talking about MFE, and we all know about the district-wide MFE as a district-wide PTO group, they are doing the celebration for education for all the educators on the May 2nd, which is a Saturday. And at the party starts at 5:30, and the location is at Blue Hill Country Club. So highly recommend everybody to register and to help celebrate the educators who have contributed a lot of their work and hours during the school year to help all our students thrive and learn in the classroom setting. And the tickets, the early bird ticket sales ends tonight at midnight. So for those of you who are listening, please go online to the website to grab your ticket before it increases prices starting tomorrow. Yeah, that's hopefully you get this flyer postcards in the mail. So if you register by tonight, is you save 25% on the tickets. So for our educators who are actually getting the award on that day, physical award on that day, then they will have they can bring their whole family there as well for free. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest news. And also, if you know of any local business, some like your kids music teacher, music schools, or any kind of like sports organizations, if you want to reach out to them and let them know about the MFE Celebration for Education event, and if they wanted to become a sponsor for this event, their logos will be posted on their websites and also in their emails to the community as well. So it's a great promotion effort. What else? Okay, so the Teacher of the Year awards, the 10 awards, educators come from all the schools in the district. So, and including specialty teachers as well. So that's something that we should look forward to find out the full list later on next week. So that's the main news. They also mentioned about there was a Cunningham mother who passed away on April 5th, who has 3 children in the in the school district, a 4th grader, 3rd grader, and 4-year-old child, and someone who was very involved with the PTO at Cunningham School, and they are one of the MFE members is raising this and hoping that will like people in the community could help with a GoFundMe to help the family pass this challenging time. So that's all the important updates from MFE.
I'll take it just because we haven't had a meeting, but there's been work on the computer essentially with the MSBA. We've been, Sean, Nick, and to me, to a much lesser extent than Sean and Nick, have been just updating. We got feedback from the MSBA on our RFP document that we send out to get bidders for our OPM. And so I've just been taking those edits and updating the document to send back. We have to get approval of that document from MSBA before we send it out. So that has been kind of the work. So it's all related to just finalizing the process to secure the OPM. So that's the work kind of behind the scenes. We hope to get that approval soon and still move forward with securing an OPM here in the next, or have interviews for an OPM here in the next week.
Sure. So I think at the last meeting, I provided a brief update and signaled that at this meeting, we would be going into an executive session to discuss a little bit in more detail some of the substance of the negotiations thus far. So we will be doing that at the conclusion of this meeting. But in terms of just update for the public, negotiations continue to progress well. Just definitely continue to appreciate the collegiality of our negotiations with the MEA. With Unit A, that is still the unit that we are engaging in negotiations with. But we've now, having fully exchanged proposals, which occurs over those 3 main bargaining sessions, we are now back and forth, responding to one another's proposals, and it's been productive so far. And that will continue. We'll be picking those sessions back up after the April vacation. And then I know we're gonna approve minutes and talk about the next meeting, and then we can adjourn into executive session. I have some motion language for that, and I'll share more of an update for the full school committee. The next item is approval of minutes. So just make a motion for this. In the folder, there were the minutes for March 11th, March 16th, and March 25th. So I will make a motion to approve the minutes of the following Milton School Committee meetings: March 11, 2026, March 16, 2026, and March 25th, 2026. Do I have a second? Second.
There are a couple of typos. On the March 11th, please look at the comment. It's just people's names spelled wrong, or the Calicut is also spelled wrong.
I think we can still approve.
Yeah.
Just
It's very minor. It's not
so we
content.
can just fix the typo. They're just typos. Nothing substantive.
You left comments on right for each of the ones, looks like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so roll call vote.
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Anna?
Sorry, yes.
Lincoln?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Those are all approved. The next meeting, draft agenda items, we just had the school committee reorganization, and then John, I know that you have a couple of other items you want to cover.
Yes, on the 29th meeting, in addition to the reorganization, we'd like to do the final vote of the financial policies that we just discussed tonight from finance this morning. That will be a vote. We would also like to have, Katie will be presenting the Q3 from the FY26 budget at that point in time. And then the school committee will need to appoint me to be the South Shore Collaborative representative for the next school year. I'll be at a meeting with those folks on Friday, and that's just an annual vote that the school committee does each year. So that should not be a heavy lift that night. So we appreciate folks being part of the reorg and doing some business that night in order to get it done.
Also, do you want to cover that night? If not, I think that is everything, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So it would be a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session, in compliance with Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to discuss collective bargaining strategy with Milton Educators Association.
Second.
Roll call, Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.